The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Glory to you, Lord. Jesus and his disciples left from there and began a journey through Galilee, but he did not wish anyone to know about it. He was teaching his disciples and telling them, "The Son of Man is to be handed over to men, and they will kill him. And 3 days after his death, the Son of Man will rise." But they did not understand the saying, and they were afraid to question him. They came to Capernaum, and once inside the house, he began to ask them, "What were you arguing about on the way?" But they remained silent. They had been discussing among themselves on the way who was the greatest. Then he sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "If anyone wishes to be first, he shall be the last of all and the servant of all." Taking a child, he placed it in their midst, and putting his arms around it, he said to them, "Whoever receives one child such as this in my name receives me, and whoever receives me receives not me, but the one who sent me." The Gospel of the Lord.
When I was a teenager, I used to love to read the book of James, St. James, the one we had today. And the reason was because he wrote in plain English, or at least plain Greek. Yeah, I could understand what he was saying, and today he's got some tough sayings. Now, today he's going after one of the 7 deadly sins. Today he's going after the sin of envy. Envy's kissing cousin, blind, crazy ambition. St. Thomas defined envy or jealousy. He uses the word jealousy, but there's a subtle difference between the two. But Thomas defines envy as an irrational anger at the success of other people. If you're doing well, somehow I feel diminished. As a matter of fact, Gore Vidal, the author, once says, "Every time one of my friends, not one of his enemies, but one of my friends succeed, I'm a little less." That's because the envious person sees the world as a zero-sum game. And if you're doing well, then maybe I'm not doing quite as well as you are, and I want to be where you are. He said, every time somebody succeeds, something in me dies. The kissing cousin, as I said, of envy is ambition, blind ambition. I'm going to get ahead. If envy is putting people down, I used to be the pastor of an all-African-American parish, and they used to have a saying that if you're going to dig a hole for your neighbor, you better dig 2, because you're going down with them. So if that's putting people down, and you are going to go down with them, and James is going to say it very, very clearly, a blind ambition is raising yourself up so that you can be superior to the other. Right now we're hearing lots and lots and lots, every time we turn on the television, about supremacy. And I really think whether we are conscious of it or not, we are always ranking ourselves either above or below another group. And that causes the jealousy and the envy if we think that we are below someone else, or this sense of I am the right or the best if we think we are above somebody else. It's often said that the elites control the poor that way by making them say, well, at least I'm not one of those. Well, that's the trap that the deadly sins put us in. Here's how St. James says it. Where jealousy and selfish ambition exists, there's disorder and every vile practice. It leads to chaos. It leads to disorder. There is a natural order of things, and when we find ourselves in this constant war of either being jealous or envious of someone or superior to the other, we are always leading ourselves into some kind of chaos. You know, we call envy one of the 7 deadly sins But in truth, it probably could be called a capital sin, because it's foundational of other sins. From this kind of envy grows, envy wants to bring someone else down. And so how do we do that? Well, we gossip about them. We talk about them. One of the wonderful things about gossip is it always makes you feel better than the other person for about a minute or two. It doesn't last. And truth be told, that we're all gossips. We all talk about everybody else. You remember the old saying, the small minds talk about people, great minds talk about ideas. And we are sometimes get caught in this small little gossip. And then envy leads to the other sin of ambition, unbridled ambition. I will step on anybody I need to step on my way up. St. James then goes on to ask the rhetorical question, where do the wars and where do the conflicts among you come from? Then he answers it. Is it not from your passions that you make war with your members? What are these passions? You know, Jesus talks about this in a number of places. He says, don't worry about what's going from the outside. That doesn't make anybody ugly or evil. What makes us ugly and evil comes from the inside. Then he gives that whole list, jealousy, anger, rage, lust, that whole list of things. He said there's something inside of us that is not healthy. It probably is the result of the original sin that we have picked up today. And so the question is, if that's in there and it is destructive and it brings us down, how do we get out of it? Well, the gospel today gives us a possible way out if we're willing to pay attention. Now, this is the second week in a row when Jesus is trying to instruct his disciples the way of transformation. The way of getting rid of the evil that is inside of us. And that is the way that we don't want to hear or incapable of hearing. And that's the way of the cross. And so last week he was saying that the Son of Man is going to suffer at the hands of the chief and the scribes and the powers that be, and he will be crucified and raised at the last day. And remember last week Peter says, oh God forbid, not you. And he says, get away from me. You're caught in your own little passions of who's going to be the better one. This is not your idea of a Messiah. The Messiah for you is the one who's going to put Rome down. That's not who I am. That's not how you deal with the passions inside. You embrace the sin of the world and transform it by giving back love. That's the secret. And so today he's saying exactly the same thing. And honestly, it's going to go right over the apostles' head. Last night when I celebrated my 50th anniversary at St. Michael's, I said the hardest thing for us to hear and to understand is the way of the cross. And yet that really is the way of salvation. And the only way we're ever going to really understand it is when we see it incarnated in someone else. Now, the disciples never got what Jesus was trying to say, and obviously today they don't get what Jesus is trying to say. For the simple reason that, because of what they do. They don't get it until they see it, till they see him die on the cross, till he is risen from the dead. Those are the things that kill the ugliness, the passion, the selfish, the jealousy, the envy, the things that tear us apart, the wars, because we got to be a little bit better than the other. We got to be first, me first. That is so un-Christ-like. That is utterly un-Christian. And of course, obviously the disciples are un-Christian. Because as he's trying to teach them and they're walking along, they're having an argument, they're having a fight. And when he gets back, he says, what are you fighting about? And it's an amazing little part of the gospel, because this is at once hilarious and horrendous. It's hilarious because they so utterly don't get it. It's horrendous because they utterly don't get it. What are they fighting about? Who's number one? Which one of them is the greatest? He says, let me try again. Do you see how long it takes to get to be a transformed person, to be another Christ? And the only way we're going to get there is by following his pattern, following his path. And that means that there will be setbacks, there will be crucifixions, there will be dead ends, there will be deaths, there will be divorces. It's going to happen. And then we pick ourselves up, we dust ourselves off, we begin again at a deeper and a more profound level. That's the Paschal pattern. That's the pattern that we are all called to live. That's the pattern that I tried to live in my 50 years of celebrating the priesthood that God has given to me. And so he's going to try one more time. And he brings out his favorite visual aid. Brings out a little kid. Brings out a little kid, puts the little kid in front of them. We need to understand, we dote on little kids. We love our little kids. Not in Jesus' time. In Jesus' time, little kids were absolutely no counts. They had no power. They had no say. They had no nothing. They are the bottom of the barrel. You cannot get any lower than a little child, or maybe a widow who had no one to support her. That's pretty low too. So it was always widows and orphans and children that we were always saying that we got to take care of them first. And he says to this little child, the one who receives this child receives me. Why? Where does a child live? A child does not live in the past, because there's very little past for the child to live in. Doesn't live in the envy of those who have something more than he has. The child doesn't live in the future, an ambition for them making millions of dollars and being rich people. No, the child lives in the now. The sacred, naked now. And that's where Jesus is inviting the disciples to come into. Right now. Right now. This is all there is. Is life falling apart? It's okay. Embrace it. Are you carrying the cross right now? Is there a sickness or a pain or a suffering or an addiction that you can't deal with? It's okay. It's okay. I'm going to lead you through it. But don't go this other route, because it's just going to lead you down a black hole that you're not going to get out of. Follow my way, because here's what I promise you. I promise you. You follow the way of the cross, and it will always, 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 with the love that you carry in your heart, lead to life and resurrection.